has started the record. So we will get started. And if you're joining us, we're just asking that you keep your microphones on mute. We are recording this session to share with our community a little bit later. And so if you would prefer not to be recorded, there's an option on the bottom of your screen to shut off the camera. And you can use that if you didn't want to have yourself recorded. But first, just wanted to welcome those that have joined us. Today, we wanted to have a couple opportunities to speak with our families about some information that we got last week about virtual learning, specifically for middle school age students, and what our approach is going to be moving forward for the rest of this year. So you may have heard that the School District of Philadelphia released their plan for return of students to school. What that looks like for the district-wide is K through 2 students, so kindergarten through 2nd grade students, are going to be returning in a hybrid model starting on November 30th. And all other grade levels are on a hold to return until January and February. And most likely what that means for Baldy is we can expect to remain virtual until at least, and if I'm freezing up, Ms. Cherney, let me know in the chat. I'm noticing my internet's a little bit wacky here at school. I'm good? Okay. We're not going to return to person until at least February. And that's school-wide. There are some instances where some students with different needs may enter the school earlier based on the plan now. However, for a majority of our students at school, this means that we're going to remain virtual until February. And what that does is it gives us a path forward. We know now that there are going to be these first 2 marking periods of school that students are going to have learning from home. And that gives us an opportunity to plan what that looks like instructionally moving forward too. And so part of today is really to talk through what that's going to look like for our students and what that can mean for families as well. So with that, I wanted to talk through a couple things today. The first is that I wanted to put this check-in question up for families. This is actually something that we are doing school-wide with our students. Is each morning when students log in, we're having a community meeting. And this is a sample of some questions that your students might see. And we believe these are really important in helping to start positively in a school day. And so if you're on the call, again, your students are seeing questions like this, usually on a daily basis, but wanted to kind of share with you something that we're asking students to do. Because we're in such unusual and strange and tense times, it's important to take care of ourselves. And so one way we're doing that is through these check-in questions. And so we're not asking you to, unmute yourselves and share, but take a moment and think about some of these and really check in with yourself. And so the first question that we ask is, how are you feeling today? So take a moment and think, like, what are you feeling? What are those emotions that you are working with today, both positive and negative? And then a little bit more forward thinking. So what's something you're looking forward to today? What is something that you're looking forward to today? And what we find is with students, it might be a class, it might be an activity with their family later in the day, but important to be thinking about what are those positive things that you're looking forward to. Then what is something you're not looking forward to today? And my mind's going to several meetings that I have this afternoon. Just kidding. Is there anything you would like the class to know? And then finally, is there anything you need help with? And so these are several questions that we run through with students in our community meetings in the morning and that we find help set students up for success for the day and hits on something that's really important that I'm going to be talking through a little bit, which is the social emotional wellness of our students, especially now that we have more information about what the learning is going to look like over the next couple months. And with that, I wanted to give a little bit of updates around grades. And so we shared some information with families this morning. We are at the halfway point in the marking period, which means that teachers have input grades that gives you an indication of where your student is almost a little bit over halfway through this first marking period. And in the past, when we were in person, we would send home an interim report card. This year, we're encouraging families to check and follow grades online using the parent portal. If you're on this call, Ms. Cherney is going to put the link in for a stepper with how you can check on your student's progress for this first marking period. If you're watching a recording of this, then we encourage you to visit our school website where we have some information about how you can access your student grades. This is a bigger picture, looking forward and looking a little bit longer ahead. The end of the marking period is going to be on November the 17th is when that report card window is going to close for the first marking period. And that's when the first quarter's grades will be finalized. This is a little bit looking ahead further into the year two, where you're able to see what the grades windows are going to look like later into the school year as well. But for families on this call and thinking about this marking period, interim grades are live in your parent portal. You can check those. And the end of the marking period is November 17th. A couple other important pieces of information that I wanted to share about grades is we really want parents to support with monitoring student grades. And so you can get in the habit of checking in regularly to see how students are doing by logging into your parent portal. Also know that your student can do the same. Students can log into their student portal and they can check their grades as well. Also notice that if you're checking student grades and you're seeing an M next to a student's assignment, that means that assignment is missing. And that's important to take note of. If a missing assignment in the end of the marking period, if it's still not turned in, will be changed to a 55 in the grade book. And this could dramatically affect a student's overall grade. Right now, it's simply indicated with an M in the grade book, but it's important as you continue to monitor the work that students are turning in to notice that later in the marking period, if you see a drop in a student's grade, it's most likely because they're missing assignments they need to complete. And so really encourage families to continue to look at grades regularly and to make sure students are completing their assignments when they're due. And that's one of the challenges that we have virtually, is that a lot of that ownership for student performance is falling on students and families. And so please do make sure that you're regularly checking in on students' grades. Another new piece of information and students are assessed, and so there is test taking over the computers that's happening, is when students are taking assessments, they need to have their cameras on. And teachers will provide that direction in class, but it is an expectation when students are taking graded assessments that their cameras are on. And if you hear a teacher requesting that students do that, we are hoping that students and families are understanding that there's a need in order to make sure students are completing assignments with fidelity, that their cameras are on during those times as well. And we will talk about cameras a little bit more in a bit. One of the questions that came up in our town hall submission was around classroom attendance. I wanted to give a little bit of clarity there, because if you are familiar with the parent portal, you can also check on your students' daily attendance. Attendance is taken at middle school every class period. And so, and what teachers are using is they're using when students are logging in, they're taking attendance that way. And for classes that are asynchronous, there's an assignment that students need to turn in for them to get credit for being in attendance for that day. But know that teachers are taking attendance in classrooms each day when kids are logging in. However, if a student is marked present in class for a period, they are present for the entire school day. And that's important to know as well. So if you're checking your students' attendance records, you see they were marked absent for a period, it very well could be a mistake. It could also be that a student did not log in to class that day when the teacher was taking attendance, and we can go in and make those adjustments as needed. But if they were marked present for other class periods, then they are marked present for the entire school day. And we get a lot of questions about high school applications, making sure students have those accurate attendance records. We are able to adjust and remedy those attendance concerns if you're noticing your students marked absent. But also know that students, if that absence report, if they were marked present in another class, it's not going to show up as a full day of them being absent. They would be marked present for that full day of school. And transparently, attendance is something that we are is difficult virtually, and there have been instances where we found some errors in marking students present, but we're always working to try to fix those concerns as parents present them to us too. Another thing to notice is that if you are wanting to excuse your student for a class period, you can submit an absence note on our school website. And Ms. Cherney could even drop the form that we're using in the chat if you're needing to submit a doctor's note or a reason why a student may be absent. Another question that we got was about elective clubs. So our elective clubs are up and running daily. Elective clubs are in that screen break lunch period for many of our students during their day. So for 6th grade students, elective clubs are from 11:30 to 12:15. For 7th grade students, it's from 12:15 to 1 o'clock. And from 8th grade students, it's from 1 to 1:45. And we have a lot of different offerings. And we encourage students that are interested in getting some time with their friends in an area of their interests to check out what our elective clubs are. Those options are available on our school website. And for students that are logging in for the first time, in order to join an elective club, you go to the elective menu, which Ms. Cherney will put that link in our chat again. And if you're watching this on video, again, all of this is found on our school website. You can find the links to the Google Classroom. So students will join that club's Google Classroom. And then once they're in there, they'll find the Google Meet code. And I added a couple images from our cooking club, which is up and running, where students are able to join and learn a new recipe that hopefully maybe will help contribute to some dinner in the household for your family. And so that's one of the clubs that we offer weekly. And not every club meets every day. And so that's why it's important to check that elective schedule, because you might find that a club's meeting on a day 3 on our schedule, but then not meeting again until a day 6. And so it's important that students are checking and families are checking that elective club menu if they wanted an opportunity to join one of our programs that's happening during the middle of the school day. Clubs are voluntary. It's not required that students join a club. But one thing that we're really focused on, in particular, knowing that we're going to be out until at least February, is how are we as a school providing opportunities for students to get together and socialize? And clubs are one of those spaces where that can happen. And so if you're a parent concerned about your student having opportunities to interact with other kids during this time, we really encourage you to check out some of our elective clubs. There's some really fun things that are happening in those spaces. As I go throughout, if there are questions that come up, you can use the chat to ask a question of our team. We have several of our staff members on. It's good to see Ms. Nusky, our 8th grade assistant principal, Ms. Cherney, of course, our community liaison. I think Dr. Flemings I saw, and Melissa Bragg is also on the call too. We have a team here to answer any questions that you have that may come up during our time together. And so feel free to add those in the chat. And at the end, we'll give an opportunity for more questions. Okay, so one of the big reasons I wanted to have a town hall and speak to our community is because we now know what this path moving forward is going to look like until February. We're going to be operating the same school schedule that we have for the start of the school year, and we really want to make sure that our virtual learning experiences are meaningful and are preparing our students for high school. And what we wanted to share is over these first 6 weeks, we've been able to gather information about what's really working in classrooms as it comes to best practices for learning over a computer, which, by the way, is brand new for a lot of us on this call, unless your student went to an online school. We are learning how to do this, and we are trying to continually improve our program each day. And so one of the things that we've noticed and it might seem obvious, is the best way to do this virtually is for students to engage. And engagement means that students are turning their cameras on, are unmuting their microphones, are interacting with their colleagues and their peers and their teachers in real time in classrooms. And so we do a lot of classroom visits to see how virtual learning looks. And what we found is the classrooms where students are interacting with each other and the teacher by using the video and microphone, those spaces are much more meaningful. And so what we're really encouraging as we go through these next several months is for students as often as they can to use the camera and microphones on the computers to interact with their peers and with their teachers. The best classroom spaces are where this is happening every day. Doesn't mean that your student has to have their camera on for 60 minutes when they're live each and every day. Of course not. There are things that are happening in the household. There are other siblings that are learning next door. There is somebody knocking on your door. The dog starts to bark. There are a whole bunch of things that are happening virtually that may mean you're not able to have that camera on for the entire time. However, as often as we can, that camera should be on. And that if a teacher is asking a question, students should be using the chat function. They should be turning their microphones on. This is a best practice, and it's something that we really think is going to help prepare our students for high school. And so when I think about why it's important for us to up our game virtually, it's really thinking about our role as a middle school, which is to get kids ready for high school and beyond. And we mentioned this a little bit earlier about that socializing piece. Students are not getting that in this virtual space. And when we're in classrooms together and we're focusing on a math problem or a social studies project, we feel that when students have their cameras on, their mics off, and they're able to talk with each other, that's where the most collaborative, meaningful learning experiences are happening. And so we're making a big push for families to also at home, and I'll talk about this in a moment, you have the opportunity to set what school looks like for your kids. And we want at home school to look, especially now that we know we're going to be doing this till February, as much like school would be in person as possible. And that means that when we're able to see students' faces, we're able to see their response to a question, we're able to hear their voices, we can better support their learning experience. We can better understand where there are opportunities to fill in some of those gaps in learning that are going to help prepare students for high school and beyond. And so our big message, and we're going to be sending out some student videos, we're going to be having a big push across the school, is let's up our game. So you'll see the graphic on here is, and this is Ms. Cherney's wonderful work of art. I do not make our school graphics. And so if you see Mr. Hostetter all over the place, no, I like it, but it's not me making these graphics, is let's level our game up. Let's take it to the next level. Baldy is known around the school district as one of the best middle schools. In fact, we were ranked the #1 middle school, you might have heard that from me before, in Philadelphia last year. So we want to take our game to the next level. And we feel like if all middle schools are virtual in Philadelphia right now, Baldy's going to set itself apart by having the best student engagement. And that means that we want to have students up their game and turn their cameras on. You can blur your background. You can mute yourself. But I've heard from parents and I've heard from students that some kids are in their bed all day. Some students are playing video games while they're logged into a classroom. And that's just not how we learn. We know that. And so we really want to make sure that all of our kids, and we also know that kids learn best from each other. And so if I'm a student in a classroom and I have my camera on and I have my mic off and I'm engaging in the lesson, but my classmates are not doing the same, my classmates aren't getting the best learning experience and I'm not getting the best learning experience either. And so we really want to push for our students to make sure they're upping their game, they're leveling up to bring their best selves to their classes each and every day. What can you do as a family at home to support your students? This, I think, is one of the biggest pieces to partnering between school and home. You have the ability. We cannot mandate as a school that kids have their cameras on each day. We can't give a 0 for a student having their camera off, because we know there are circumstances at home that might prevent that. And I'll talk about that in a moment too. But what you can do at home is you can set that expectation for what school looks like. You have the complete control as a parent to say, when we are going to school each day at 8:11, this is where we're working from. Here is your home desk. This is what you have to do in order to prepare yourself for school. You have to get dressed. You can't be in your PJs all day. When you're in lessons and you have live instruction, have your camera on. That's what Baldy wants you to do. That's what's going to get you ready for high school. You can carve out time for students to do homework throughout the course of the day too. You have the opportunity to set that expectation at home. So maybe from 5 o'clock till 5:45, all electronics are off, and we're going to close our computer and we're going to get into the math workbook and we're going to do some practice problems. At home, you can set that expectation. And I think that's where a lot of the staff feedback and where we're hearing from our school community is, in school, we're able to kind of set those parameters in a classroom. We can set up times where this is focused, individual, independent work time. This is collaborative group time. We don't have that opportunity virtually. And so we're really relying on households and at home to be very clear about what that expectation is for learning from home. And you can also think about how to use that flex elective time in your household too. So those times that you're asynchronous or that students are not having to be on live. At home, you all can think about like what this looks like. And I know this works because there are a lot of people on this call that are already doing this. And so what I'm sharing is a best practice that I've heard from families so far. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago for our advisory council. These are what families are already doing at home to make a really unfortunate situation, which is learning from home, feel more like school. And so, we're excited to work with you. We also want to encourage, if students are not able to turn their cameras on, we have staff for whatever reason. Maybe it's they're shy and they don't like having their face on the screen. Maybe it's because there is a lot going on at home. We want to know that. I think what is troublesome for us as a school is when we don't know why a student doesn't have their camera on. And so we're really encouraging our kids to reach out to our counselors, to our teachers, if there's a barrier to why we're not able to have cameras and microphones on, to communicate that with our staff. So that's the big push now, again, is we're going to be here till February. How do we make the most of this moment as one of the top middle schools in this area? What are we doing? And we really want to encourage more participation in our virtual. We have kids we have 95% attendance every day. So we have kids that are logging in. The next level, though, is engaging in those virtual lessons each and every day. And so we're asking for community support and making that happen. I know a lot of questions there are several different things that are out there, and I want to make sure, Ms. Cherney, if we could pull up the questionnaire that was submitted, if there's something that I didn't touch on yet, we're able to answer those questions. And then for families that might have questions, you can please use the chat. You can ask those questions now as they're coming in. So if you have those questions, feel free to drop them in. I'm going to use Ms. Cherney as kind of my debate moderator, since we're in the political season right now. You're my moderator now. If you could just kind of frame some of the questions that we've received through Google or that are coming to the chat.
Sure. So Nick is asking, some teachers have mandated that the camera must be on during class or they will lose points. I don't agree. Some children like mine have social anxiety when being shown on camera. I understand the need to pay attention, but I'm not getting the impression that not being on camera is being interpreted as being engaged. We as parents make sure he is paying attention and completes his assignments.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Nick, for that question, because that's been something that we've talked about as a staff and a school. Students should not be docked any points for not turning their cameras on. And the only caveat for that is during assessments, so testing, is when we've been told cameras need to be on in school. And I think your example here is really important for reaching out to specific teachers and sharing what you've shared. What we know that a lot of students have anxiety about being on screen. And what I want to make sure we're able to do is work with that student, because the expectation shouldn't be that, you know, your child has their camera on all the time. There are opportunities, I think, during a lesson where it is important for them to be able to interact with their peers or have that camera on for a period of time. But we can't mandate that cameras are turned on. We can't dock off participation points for students that are not turning their cameras on. There are activities in some classes that mean that students should have their cameras on. And if they're not on, it potentially, because of the engagement that might be required for that task or activity, it might affect a student's ability to be successful with that task. But if a teacher is docking points or marking a student absent, that shouldn't be happening in that class period. And listen, there are some school districts that have come out pretty forcefully and said cameras must be on during virtual learning. We know at our school and across Philadelphia that might not always be possible for students. And so we want to be thoughtful about what that looks like. So, and I appreciate your support with making sure your student is engaged. I think that's more of the ask right now, Nick, is just making sure that, you know, as often as we can, supporting students to be engaged during virtual learning. And for a lot of our kids, that means having their camera on. For students like yours, that might not mean having the camera on. There might be some, if turning a camera on would mean that your student is not willing to engage as often because they're camera shy or they don't want to be on, we don't want that to happen either, right? And if they're engaging perfectly fine with their camera off with all of the lesson, that's great. Keep it up. A lot of our students are not, though, too. And so this ask of cameras on might not be a perfect fit for what your child's experiencing. But for a lot of our students, we know there's kind of an accountability to having a camera on. So continue to communicate those individual concerns with teachers and staff. And if there's ever a reason that you feel like your child's having their grade reduced for not having a camera on, include myself in a message. You're not getting a teacher in trouble. We're just all trying to figure out the best ways to support our kids.
Next question. The assignments given do not seem to match the instruction that children are given, and the homework is often on material that has not been taught. What efforts are being done to sync the lessons to the assignments?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And I think if you're noticing that across several classrooms, that might be a pattern that needs to be addressed at that grade level. I think and so if it is across a grade level, could you please contact the grade level administrator? Was that a question from the Google form, Ms. Cherney? Yeah. So that's a question from the Google form. I would encourage that person to contact the grade level administrator so we can help support, make sure there's more of a direct link between what's happening in class and those assignments. That's something that we work with teachers on. And that could be an area where we could improve alignment. And that might be great feedback to have. So again, that partnership between something that you might be noticing with the task alignment is something that we could take as feedback back to that teacher or back to those teachers and see if we can create stronger connections there too. I think our goal, though, is to have alignment as often as possible with every assignment that we do. So if there's learning that's happening live in class, we want the flex time to be connected to that. We want any subsequent homework to be connected to that too. So if there's an area that we can improve, we would love to have that feedback and encourage you to reach out to the grade level administrator and frankly the teacher too, and just say that's something that you've been noticing. Sometimes, you know, teachers might not be entirely aware of how that's playing out once students aren't live in front of them. And so that might be good feedback for that staff member to have also.
Jennifer asks, I have noticed my son's work is done and submitted, but doesn't go through, and we don't find out until a few weeks that it's missing. My son's work is done every day and still had a lot of missing assignments. How do we fix this?
I think that's an example, again, of communication between family, teacher, and our grade level administrator. And so, Ms. Turney, I know you're doing a lot right now, but if you get a chance, could you drop in the names and emails of our grade level administrators into the chat so we could have that information for folks? And if you're watching this video later and you've submitted that question, all of that information is on our school website where you can reach out. If you're noticing that assignments aren't going in, I think the first step is to make teachers and our staff aware of that. In the past, it would have been very easy to call the school, leave a message for somebody, get in touch with them. If now that we're virtual, I think that communication, and this is fine to do, reach out via email, contact us, especially our grade level administrators, through email, and express your concern. We found that's the best link then to get in touch with a classroom-based teacher. And so if you're noticing there's a lot of missing assignments or something doesn't seem right, that might be the case. Yesterday, the entire Google Meet crashed across the school district of Philadelphia. There are technical issues that we have in this virtual space that we want to make sure we're staying on top of. And so I encourage that person to reach out specifically to a grade level administrator or a teacher with that question.
Okay. Given that it's in the best interest for all students to stay home, if they have symptoms or have been exposed, will they have the option to join classes virtually on days they are expected to attend physically so they don't miss class time?
So that's a question that feels, light years away right now, honestly, for me. It's just, there are going to be options for families who want to remain completely virtual for the school year when we do go back. And I think we have to wait a little bit longer at the middle school level and see what transpires with the readiness of our school building, with what happens with the number of cases in our area, because all of those factors are going to determine when we return to school. I know from the meetings that we've had as principals and school leaders that there are a lot of concerns about what return to school would look like and how we would organize that. And because of that, there's going to be a lot of options for families that might not feel comfortable returning in person to still stay at Baldy and remain virtual. I don't have specifics on what that can look like yet. And I know there are a lot of folks working over these next couple months to think about a large return to school and how to do that safely, but also how to accommodate families that might not feel comfortable with their students returning to school this year. So it's more of a stay tuned question.
This may be another one.
Yeah.
Over the summer, there were concerns mentioned about proper ventilation in schools in our district. How are these problems being rectified, as proper ventilation is key when preventing the spread of the illness?
So I'm just going to stop sharing the screen for a moment. That's a really great question. And we've had over the last 2 months an intensive assessment of our ventilation system that's ongoing right now. That's one of the major factors determining safe return to school. On the School District of Philadelphia's webpage, there is a dashboard that tracks school readiness and return. I would encourage you to visit philasd.org and see how that dashboard is updating. And I think it gives specifics on each school too. But as we speak, there are people in our school, I'm at school right now, who are doing assessments of our ventilation system. And that's going to be a key factor in determining when we return to school.
last one. So what are some tips and reassurance you can provide to students who are having a tough time absorbing material via this platform?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. That's a good one to kind of wrap with. I think the reassurance for students is what I've noticed is this time is building a lot of resilience in our community and our students, and this is difficult, and it's difficult for everyone. I think reassuring kids that visiting classrooms, we just in observing teachers and observing students, is kids are learning, and a lot of kids are doing really, really well. It does not mean that virtual learning is effective for everyone in the same way. I know that there are, if we're putting our best effort forward and we're trying our hardest, there are positives that I'm seeing all over our virtual school building right now. And a lot of it has to do with students who are producing very creative thinking in their assignments. They're demonstrating more independence and ownership of their schoolwork than I've ever seen before. And when we think about like high school readiness and getting kids ready for that next level, I think one of the most important skills that students have and that makes them successful at that next level is an independence and ownership of their learning. And that's hard. It takes practice. It takes time to develop that. And I've noticed a lot of our students who are doing well in this virtual space, finding ways to stay engaged, to participate, to get excited about school, to stay connected with their peers, and to get really creative and innovative. And I think that's something that I hope all schools and education takes from this moment, is like, how do we make school, when we go back, and how do we make school better? What opportunity does this moment provide for us to get better as schools and really as a society, to support those that need the most help? And so I guess my reassurance is that, there will be a time where we go back to school safely. And in the moment that we find ourselves, continue to push yourself to do better, to be the best student that you can be, because even if you're not grasping all the content as deeply as you would like to be right now in this moment, the resilience and the ability to do things independently are going to be skills that are going to last a lifetime. And it's hard for all of us, and we're all trying to figure this out together. And I really do hope that when we come back together as a school, it's just going to make everyone that much stronger and that much more motivated. From a data level, though, I'll share this final thought, is we did a universal screener of our school. So we use data a lot at Baldy. That's one of the reasons that we've been successful. And we like to know where our students are and what they need in order to get better. And we did a universal screener, and students performed at a similar rate in English language arts, and actually at a higher rate in mathematics when we compared it year over year. And I think that was a really exciting thing to notice, is that our data indicates that our students are learning in the virtual spaces. And I think that gives me hope that, while we're in learning over our computers, that we can do it, and that we can learn, and that students are. Final point to that is we use that data that we gather from student learning. It's called the STAR assessment. Your students may have taken it recently. We use grades, and we use teacher input to really focus on what does each individual student need while we're virtual, in order to be as successful as they can be. And so one of our next big task as a school community is to really figure out what students need in order to be best prepared for high school and beyond. And again, that goes back to families. We really want, if you're noticing something at home, you're noticing that your kid is struggling, you're noticing that there needs to be additional support, please reach out to us. Please reach out to our counselors, our teachers. Students aren't always the ones that are eager to share that information, and so we rely on parents to be able to share that too. And so if you're noticing your child is struggling, we have supports at our school to help. And so please reach out and contact us. Ms. Cherney, were there any other questions? I do see
one last question.
Yes.
About the 1 hour and 45-minute flex break in the middle of the day. Are the children supposed to be screen free, or are they expected to do assignments during this time?
And I appreciate that question, because I think this was purposefully left a little bit open for families, which I think, depending on your student and how your student is doing in this moment, we're not mandating that students are completing assignments during that time. We have purposely said that is a screen break in the middle of the day. And some students might need to use that time to get caught up on assignments. Some students might need to use that time to close the computer screen, get out of the house, do something away from their computer for a bit, in order for them to come back in the afternoon and be productive and be their best self. And so I really encourage you to figure out how best to use that time in the middle of the day. That's why we also gave time for elective clubs, so maybe you think your student might need time to talk about anime with a friend. Join our anime club. That is a time that we're leaving purposely open for families to determine how they best want to use that space. And so there's no mandated assignment too. But you can also use that. So say you wanted to complete an assignment that was given for flex, right? You could use that screen break time to do some of that flex work, because at 9:30 to 10, your student needed a break. And so we want to give some freedom for families to be able to determine how best to use that time. Works for some, doesn't work for all. And I think that's kind of the theme of the virtual learning, is just like what we have to figure out what works best for our students. And you guys are getting, I want to just end by thanking all the families that have joined, and thanking for all the families for the hard work they're putting in, because you all are now the additional teachers that are on site and are working with your kids and are trying to figure out what's best for them. And, it's a window into kind of the work that we do regularly as a school each day when we're in person. But, and it's hard work. It's hard to stay on top of, the learning and all of the things that go into supporting students. And, I just want to thank you all for the efforts you put in so far. So with that, thanks for joining. For folks that are watching this online, feel free to reach out to us and follow up with any questions that you have. And we're doing another one at 5 o'clock. Same messages are going to be delivered too. And so if you wanted to join, you can for that. But there's probably not going to be any more new information that we're going to be able to share. So again, thank you all. Stay safe. And we appreciate all the help and support that you've provided so far this school year.